The Texans' offense is an enigma. Between all of their weapons, all of their creative play calling, and the dynamic abilities of their young star quarterback, Houston has been able to move the ball at will on basically everyone. They currently sit at third in the NFL in yards per game at 423, which is ahead of teams like Kansas City, Pittsburgh, and Green Bay, and they also lead those aforementioned ultra-explosive Chiefs in pass yardage per game, rushing yardage per game, and red zone trips per game. And all of that production has been in spite of the fact that both Will Fuller and Kiki QT have missed time with injuries, and the offensive line has had 5 different combinations in the first 5 weeks of the season. It's not like the Texans have been benefiting from a bunch of garbage time production either. Every game they've played in except for one was extremely close throughout, so make no mistake, they have earned every single one of the yards they've gotten so far. However, in saying all of that, despite all of the yards, all of the red zone appearances, and all of the scoring chances, there is one major difference between this Houston offense and the Kansas City offense that I brought up earlier. Unlike the Chiefs, the Texans just cannot score. Bill O'Brien has put his offense into the red zone 4.4 times per game, which is third in the league behind only the Rams and the Saints. But that very same offense has only scored touchdowns on 36% of those red zone trips, which is 31st in the league. For reference, the Rams are at 60%, the Saints are at 65%, and the Chiefs are at a staggering 76%. So why is this? What is the reason for the Texans being so unstoppable on offense until they actually get close to scoring? Is it poor blocking from the offensive line? Yeah, a little bit, and that has certainly showed up in some games more than others. Is it running backs struggling to break crucial tackles and move the line of scrimmage? Sure, on a few plays maybe. Or is it all the play calling from Bill O'Brien, who has undoubtedly made some very, very questionable calls at key moments? Of course, that's part of it too. But the main reason for these struggles, at least to me, the real thorn in every Texans fan's side, is the one that they least want to admit exists: Deshaun Watson. And I'm not saying that Watson has had a bad year, in fact, quite the opposite. He's on pace to be the 6th quarterback in NFL history to throw for 5,000 yards in a single season. His completion percentage is at 65%, which is higher than last year, and his yards per attempt is at 8.4, which is also higher than last year. Oh, and he's also on pace to tack on over 600 yards of rushing production as well. So statistically speaking, Watson is having one of the most prolific seasons in the history of the league, except for the 2 most important stats of all: touchdowns and wins. So when I went back and looked at the tape to see why that is, I saw 3 very different problems with Watson in the red zone that all ended up at the exact same result: field goals being kicked instead of touchdowns scored. Now, for starters, the first issue I noticed was that I felt like the Deshaun Watson of 2018 has been a lot more cautious than the Deshaun Watson of 2017. There were a few red zone passing opportunities where I feel like, even if the look wasn't super clean, the rookie version of Watson would have still taken some shots on 50-50 balls, or maybe tried to rifle the throw into a tight but makeable window, whereas this year's version has held himself back from that a little bit. And to a degree, I do understand why. His most important job in the red zone, after all, is to protect the ball and not throw dumb interceptions. But in a way, I actually really liked when he was willing to be more aggressive and trust his receivers to make plays for him. When you've got DeAndre Hopkins one-on-one outside, even if it's a bail zone look where the corner has eyes on the ball, I like when he still throws it up high and gives Hopkins a chance to fight for it, because at the end of the day, most of the time he's going to win that battle in the air. That's exactly what 2017 Deshaun would have done, and I want to see 2018 Deshaun do that too. I understand that he really doesn't want to cost his team possessions by taking too many risks in the red zone, but at the same time, I want him to realize that he's Deshaun freaking Watson and he's good enough to make that throw. Or at least most of the time he's good enough. And that leads me to my second major issue that I noticed on film. And when you look at the Cowboys game last week, which was probably the best example of red zone ineptitude by any team all year, Watson was uncharacteristically missing several throws for touchdowns that honestly he was easily making everywhere else on the field. It's almost like once he got inside the 20-yard line, his ability to precisely place the ball exactly where he wanted to just completely disappeared. No fewer than 4 touchdown opportunities in the red zone were wasted because of poor ball placement that either outright missed his receivers or just made the catch so unnecessarily difficult that they could not bring it in. I say again, 4 missed touchdowns. This game should not have even been close to overtime. It should have been a blowout from the beginning. I know we all like to blame O'Brien for his play calling sometimes, but in that entire game, he really only called one play that I entirely disagree with or just flat out didn't like. Of course, referring to that 4th and inches call at the end of the first half. But in every other red zone opportunity, he gave his young star quarterback and star receivers plenty of chances to score touchdowns with his play calls, and they just could not execute. That's not on the coaching, that's on the players, and unfortunately that trend has held true in almost every game the Texans have played this year. Blocks have been missed, balls have been dropped, and passes have been annoyingly off target, and there's nothing really that a coach can do about that except keep calling plays that should work and hope that eventually his guys play to their potential. However, and this is a pretty big however, all of that being said, there is something that O'Brien can do as the head coach to help Deshaun Watson get back to playing to his potential, and that's continue to mold and develop his decision making before and after the snap. This was the third and probably the most important issue that I saw on film from that game. I mentioned earlier that Watson missed 4 touchdown passes because of inaccurate ball placement, but even more egregiously than those, he also missed a 5th touchdown pass because of flat-out poor decision making. And these are the missed opportunities that really sting because they remind you not only how close the Texans are to being a great offense, but also how potentially far away they are too. And here's what I mean by that. This is at the very end of the second quarter in a goal-to-go situation, just a couple plays before that heavily criticized call from Bill O'Brien on 4th and goal. The Texans are at the 9-yard line here in trips left, and the Cowboys have come out in a fairly clear 2-deep zone look. They've got a corner playing outside leverage on a tight end rather than matching DeAndre Hopkins in the near slot, so that's your first signal for zone right there. Hopkins then motions across the formation to what's called a nasty split, and of course nobody on defense follows him, so again that's another signal for zone as well. And based on all of this pre-snap information, Watson should pretty much know what's going on here by now. The Cowboys are in a simple cover 2 look out of their nickel package, and they're just going to try to keep everything in front of them and just rally and tackle before the goal line after forcing a check down. So knowing that, what are the weaknesses to this defensive coverage? Well, it depends on the route combinations and how they manipulate the corners and the safeties into certain positions. Most of the time, your biggest gaps in coverage are going to be either at about a 15 to 17 yard depth towards the boundaries away from the safeties, which is why corner routes are so good against cover 2, or you can attack at around that same depth over the middle of the field if you're able to adequately move those safeties out of the way and give your receivers a soft spot to work into. Now, the Texans are running what's called a zone beater concept here with a seam flat and a seam speed out on either side with a shallow cross from Griffin underneath, but these route combinations are really more designed to exploit the seams that you typically see in a cover 3 rather than a cover 2. If this was a roll into a cover 3, then Hopkins running this vertical seam in between the safety and the corner would be immediately open for a touchdown all day long, but as I said, that's not the defense that Watson would have read here, or rather should have read here. The Cowboys were basically giving away that they were running cover 2 from the beginning, which means this vertical seam from Hopkins would be running directly into that half-field safety. In short, it had no shot of ever being open, at least not initially. And this is where the big mistake from Watson really comes in. When these Texans receivers run out of real estate in the end zone on a short field and they are well covered by the safety, they don't just stop and give up on the play. No receiver is ever coached to just stop running. They're coached to keep going and work themselves open while the quarterback buys time. In this case, both Hopkins and Fuller are coached to roll their routes over the top of those safeties and work to the middle of the field. They basically have to convert their routes from seam routes into deep crossers that threaten the middle and put those safeties in a bind in the back of the end zone. Watson should know this. He should know that as soon as he sees that half-field safety close on Hopkins in the vertical seam, he needs to just wait a fraction of a second for Hopkins to roll over the top, clear that safety's angle, and he'll be wide open over the middle for the score. I know that they have worked on this route dozens, if not hundreds of times in practice, so why he came off of it and then just started scrambling around, I have no idea. The broadcast replay from behind Watson paints an even better picture, and it also ties in a good lesson on pocket presence as well that's important to show here. You can see that as he's getting ready to release this ball to Hopkins in the seam, he recognizes the safety sitting on it, almost daring Watson to throw it, so he smartly pulls the ball down. Now, why he was even trying to attempt this throw in the first place against a clear cover 2 look, again, that's a whole different problem that I don't really like at all, but at the very least, he recognized it in time before disaster and pulled that ball back down, so I'll give him credit for that. Now, as soon as he saw that safety coming, he should immediately be thinking of how Hopkins runs this particular seam route in this particular area of the field against this particular coverage. He should know that in just a few steps, he's going to roll that route over the top and clear this safety, and all Watson has to do is just very subtly step back into the soft spot of the pocket, keep his hips and shoulders loaded and ready to throw, and be prepared to let this ball fly as soon as possible to hit that window. That subtlety inside the pocket is extremely important, and it's something we see guys like Brady do every week. It's something we see Rodgers do every week. It's something we see Wentz and Stafford and Breeze and Luck and now Mahomes do every week as well. And if Watson wants to be considered in that category of quarterback, he needs to do it too. Instead, he panics a little bit, comes off of that perfectly viable read, and then backs up about 3 or 4 yards to give him space while he scans the field. His hips and shoulders are not loaded for a throw, his feet are all over the place, and the ball is hanging way out there just waiting to be swatted away. I mean, right now we are officially in backyard football mode. Deshaun Watson is not in control at all here. And you can still see Hopkins has come wide open over the middle, waiting for a touchdown pass that will never come. The throw was still there. The play call wasn't perfect, yes, but because of how the receivers are coached to adapt by Bill O'Brien, the throw was still absolutely there. Watson just flat out missed it. He didn't read the coverage right, he panicked when he saw the safety jumping it, he panicked even more when the pocket started collapsing, and that just triggered his instinct to run and make one of his trademark plays off the script, which ultimately of course did not work out. And you know what's really crazy? You know what the weirdest and also most exciting part about this missed read was? It still almost worked. Watson still bought time with his feet, and he still made a really good throw to his tight end to try to bail his own ass out, and Ryan Griffin just dropped it. So after all that, after all the mistakes from Watson that put so much unnecessary pressure on himself to make something out of nothing, he still almost did it. That's how good he can be. Even when he's wrong, he can still make himself right, and there's not a lot of quarterbacks that can do that. So in the end, yes, watching this Texans offense is still super frustrating, especially for me as a Texans fan. Watson is missing easy throws, receivers are dropping easy passes, some simple blocks are being missed, and some questionable plays are being called. But even with all of that, and despite seemingly being so far away from good, this offense is still so close to being great. They are right there on the cusp of getting their problems fixed. Almost every offensive metric and the film agrees with that. They just can't get out of their own way in the red zone. My Texans homerism aside, I have to think that with this quarterback, these weapons, and with this coach, they will get it together eventually. I just don't know how long that's going to take, or if it will be too late to save their season by the time they do. If they were a truly bad offense, they would not be elite in almost every yardage category and red zone appearances. That's just impossible to be terrible and still have that kind of production. So something has got to give at some point. As I've said before, this team is an enigma. They are almost inexplicable. The Texans are both the best worst team in the league and the worst best team in the league, and that means that ultimately, and in some ways unfortunately, Houston's season can now go one of two ways. Either they play to their potential and they start putting up the ridiculous point totals that almost all of their stats say that they should be putting up, or they don't fix their problems and they become just yet another what-if story in the very painful history of Texans fandom. This team is at a crossroads, and they are out of time to decide how good they want to be. Deshaun Watson is out of time to decide how good he wants to be. The Bills are coming to town in just a couple of days, and they are bringing with them a very talented, very physical, and very pissed off defense that is out to prove a point. I know that Deshaun is in pain. I know that he's already injured from the constant beatings that 2018 has delivered, but it's put up or shut up time. We need the 2017 Watson back. We need the Clemson Watson back that took hit after hit from Alabama, got back up, and won the damn game anyway. We need that franchise savior. We need that fourth quarter warrior, and we need that cold-blooded killer. And most importantly, we need him right the f*** now.
Made this here with all the ice on in the booth. At the gate outside, when they pull up, they give me loose. Yeah, jump out, boys. That's Nike boys hopping our coast.
Thank you so much for watching this week's episode, and of course, thank you to our amazing sponsor, MyBookie, for helping make all of it possible and helping to keep this channel running, because, fun fact, California is stupidly expensive, and sponsorship deals keep me alive with food and shelter and other related human needs. Anyway, hopefully a lot of you guys have already made a decent chunk of change betting on the NFL this year on MyBookie. I've been giving you guys a great deal all year long, and it is still there if you're new to this channel and you want to bet on some games, but you also want to get a little bit of extra out of it. Just head to the link in the description below, enter promo code Brett when you sign up and make that first deposit on MyBookie, and you will get up to a 100% sign up bonus on deposits of up to $1,000, which is gigantic. So again, if you're new to the channel, or maybe you've been around for a while but you want to start making some money on the side by betting on games, head to the link in the description below, use promo code Brett when you make your deposit, get that sign up bonus, and start betting. As for me, I've been recording for over 3.5 hours now, so I feel like my throat's gonna frickin' explode. I'm gonna get through this as fast as possible. I will be back next week with another Film Room episode. Wow, I can barely freaking talk right now. I will be back next week with a Film Room episode. I will have a patron-only Q&A next week. If you want to get in on that, just go to my Patreon. Link is also in the description. Doesn't matter how much you give, $1, $5, anything in between, whatever you want. $1,000 even. But please don't give $1,000. That's super irresponsible. But whatever you want to give gets you access. I don't put tiers in there or anything like that. So if you want to ask me a question, whatever question you want, that's going to be available next week. And until then, I will see you around. Later.